in a story that gripped the attention of South Africans and even those beyond our borders. Rosemary Ndlovu is described as the most calculated female serial murderer since Daisy DeMelka, the policewoman turned murderer, currently being charged for arranging the killing of her partner, and at least 5 family members has since become the subject of a movie and several articles. Now, investigative journalist and author Naledi Shange has written a book called Killer Cop, the Rosemary Ndlovu Story. She gives us an in-depth picture of who Rosemary was, where she was born and raised, and perhaps what motivated her to carry out these crimes. She joins us now to tell us more about this fascinating book. Naledi, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for coming in studio.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Mpho.
Fascinating story. It mesmerized South Africans. I mean, we were all amazed. How did this happen? Who is this woman? And you decided to take it all the way to write this book. And the details in here are certainly a lot more than what we heard as the rolling coverage happened and as the ongoing trial happened. What fascinated you about Rosemary Ndlovu?
Mpho, I've covered a lot of court stories in my journalistic career, but there was just something about Rosemary. I just felt like what we were seeing in the courtroom, all the theatrics that she was portraying, that there must have been something more to this woman. And that's what led me to go back to her very roots. I traveled all the way to Tzaneen, where she was born, where she had, and I traveled to Bushbuckridge, where she had her first husband, her first child. I contacted colleagues of hers, neighbors, everyone that I could possibly find to put this book together.
Before we go into the details of what you uncovered as you spoke to those relatives and as you interacted with all of those people, you talk here about another fascinating element of the story where you try and give us insight on Rosemary Ndlovu, who appeared to the courts really in love with the paparazzi. Also, you know, you make mention, I think it was in chapter 2, where you were sort of questioning her sanity. I mean, that in itself was also quite startling, to have a woman pose for the media.
Rosemary was everything that you wouldn't expect to see from somebody who was accused of the kind of crimes that she was accused of. For me, that's why I felt there may have been a deeper psychological thing to uncover there. I was quite surprised when the trial unfolded and her defense team didn't put forward perhaps a defense of maybe mental issues there. So, but then we found that the trial proceeded without her having had to do any mental evaluation. But it was quite fascinating to see her pose for the camera, take in all the attention that she was getting, as though she was not cognizant of the crimes that she was accused of.
Yeah, you also mentioned that the switch happened as soon as she maybe realized that this was actually a lot more serious.
That was when she had to speak about the death of her lover, Maurice Mabasa. That was the first time that we actually saw her break down in court. And before that, excuse me, before that we had seen her break down. Sorry. We had seen... Sorry.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. We'd seen, I'll allow you to clear your throat. We had seen her break down and her more human side, as opposed to this facade of a woman who, I mean, she was dubbed the Slay Queen. I mean, she came out dressed to the occasion, hairstyle and makeup, all on par. And then we see this softer element, this more human and relatable woman.
That happened for the first time that I actually saw Rosemary break down in court was when she came face to face with her mother. Now, this is a woman that she had been accused of trying to also murder 2 years ago or 4 years ago at that point. And also, she found it difficult to speak about the murder of her lover, Maurice Mabasa. But before that, Rosemary seemed to enjoy this attention, as I said, Mpho. She seemed to thrive of having all the cameras in action right on her. It was only when the state started to question her and really put her in her corner that we saw her somehow start to understand the depth of what it is that she was accused of. But most of the time, it was all about the attention, giving us the media what it is that we wanted to see in court.
You mentioned her mother, and I get really excited because what you uncovered there was also fascinating. Maria Mushwana and Rosemary Ndlovu, born to a lesbian couple.
That's correct, Mpho. One of the things that I found that was interesting was that Rosemary Ndlovu was born to a couple that was a same-sex couple, as you've rightly mentioned. And as I reveal in the first chapter of the book, it seems as though there was a curse that was put upon Rosemary when her mother left that arrangement. Rosemary's surname is not actually Ndlovu, it's Rikotso. But it seems as though when the mother left that interracial relationship, there was a curse that was bestowed upon Rosemary. And, excuse me, from the relatives that I've spoken to, it seems as that is what led Rosemary to start executing some of these killings that we saw her, or she was accused of carrying out.
So you had to go to Limpopo quite a few times to really get the full basis on the story, the other details that we didn't see in court. I mean, what was that experience like? Did you already have in mind that you wanted to tell the story? Because, I mean, you'd written so much about her, the day-to-day coverage, the articles, what happened in court. Talk us through that experience and the travels and what was going through your mind at the time. I mean, it must have been a lot to think about, Naledi, as you got home and thought, oh, my goodness, a curse. And, you know, how does this now fit into the bigger picture?
Yes. Mpho, the first time that I traveled to Bushbuckridge was when I wanted to interview Rosemary's sister, Joyce. This was supposed to be Rosemary's very last victim. And what I saw there just made me see that Rosemary came from a poverty of from a background of deep poverty.
Yeah.
I spoke to a couple of neighbors there, and they started to shift my mindset about Rosemary, because how they put it was that she was the poster child of success in the community. She was the one who had made it out, who had made a successful career for herself in Johannesburg, becoming a police officer, you know. And then I started to also speak to other people who knew her once she got married, her first husband, Handcause, and they portrayed Rosemary the Makoti and how she was when she was with them as a family. So it was quite interesting to be in that community. And a lot of people that were there were hurt to hear that a product of this little village called New Forest in Bushbuckridge was accused of the heinous crimes that she had been accused of. But at the same time, as I started to dig deeper into it all, it seemed as though all of this had already started in Bushbuckridge. As I said, Rosemary's husband, first husband, Handcause, died under mysterious circumstances in that very same community. It also happened that a couple of years later, Rosemary's first son, John Tikhoza, died in that very same community. Under very dubious circumstances as well. So now that the eyes of the community were open, they also questioned how many people could have there been more than this, more than the 6 that we saw her being tried for. They were questioning whether there could have been more victims that they were not even aware of.
Audrey, Rosemary's sister, I mean, I think you say that they were born from the same father. And that murder in itself, how it started off as an attempted murder with the poisoning, and then later full-on murder with the strangulation and the throttling. That in itself was so painful to read.
I think Audrey's death is the one that moved me the most, because the neighbors who spoke of Audrey spoke about how jovial she was to introduce Rosemary to them and brag about, this is my successful sister, the cop from Tembisa. And then the next thing, you know, you hear of how Audrey died, firstly by poisoning, and it seems as though that did not kill her, and she was essentially strangled. And all evidence leads us to believe that it was Rosemary who single-handedly performed, carried out Audrey's murder. It was a gruesome murder, and also it was one of Rosemary's most lucrative kills, because she cashed out on a lot of money following Audrey's death. And we know that from Audrey, Rosemary went on to murder Audrey's son, brilliant Mashego, all because he started to question what happened to all the funds that Rosemary had received after his mother's death.
What about your emotional well-being, your psychological? How did it feel, Naledi, to have to take in all this information and discover so much more that we didn't know as the public? And really deal with it and write it down? What were your coping mechanisms?
Mpho, this is the most difficult thing that I've ever had to do. Writing this book was really, really tough. There were times when I just threw in the towel and I felt as though I couldn't, because there was just so much to take in. It's such a sensitive story, and I'm telling the stories of all these victims as well. So it was quite tough. I remember there was a time when my publicist and I were talking and feeling as though perhaps there was even something bigger, you know, behind this, because this is a book that we had envisioned would have taken me 6 months to write, but it took well over a year and a half, close to 2 years, to just finish the product that I have there. But it was emotionally draining, and even now I'm still dealing with some of the aspects that I had to deal with when I was writing this book.
Yeah. Wow. Congratulations. I'm really proud of you, Naledi. A fascinating read. Of course, Rosemary Ndlovu, the story of a killer cop. Where can we find this book? I've seen it on the top 5 sort of books at Exclusive Books, but where else can people get it?
The book is available on different online platforms, but right now I'd recommend that people get it at Exclusive Books.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Mpho.
Thank you so much. Naledi Shange, the author of this fascinating book, the investigative journalist and author Naledi Shange.